Okay, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. My name is Richard Miles. I'm from Nanzan University, which is in Nagoya, Japan. Obviously, I'm not Japanese, I'm from Canada. And today, I'm going to quickly talk to you about the future of rhetoric in public speaking, a small study that I've recently conducted and a topic that I'm very interested in. Um, let's move on. And for those of you who perhaps don't know much about rhetoric, let me give you a little bit of background information. Rhetoric is defined as the use of symbols, primarily language, to persuade or inform. Now, it's a distinct academic field of knowledge and study and has been since the 5th century BC, making it one of the oldest academic fields in the world. It is Rhetoric is frequently viewed as synonymous with persuasion. Obviously, Aristotle has a lot to do with that. And while there are people like me who are very interested and love rhetoric, there are those who don't. And Plato famously alleged rhetoric creates belief without knowledge, something we can all relate to in this day and age, I'm sure. Then, excuse me. So, just to briefly give you an overview, then, for those of us who are interested in rhetoric and analyzing it, there are generally two ways we can do this. One is to look at the rhetorical techniques from a micro perspective, how specific language techniques are used. And these rhetorical techniques have been widely documented, and there are somewhere in the realm of 5,000 it has been documented. Um, but research to date has largely focused on non L2 speakers, primarily what we call native English speakers. How do they use rhetoric? And a typical example is focusing on presidents, world leaders, company executives, and so on like that. Typically speeches from the Western context. There is very little in terms of analysis on L2 speakers and how they use English rhetorical techniques. Now, in case you're wondering what exactly I mean by rhetorical techniques, let me give you a few examples. One from Martin Luther King. We must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools. An example of what we call an antithesis. Another one from Vincent van Gogh. Conscience is a man's compass, what we could call a metaphor. And one more, just to liven things up a little bit, Dorothy Parker. I require three things in a man. He must be handsome, ruthless, and I'll pause for a few seconds. Stupid. The example of a tricolon. Now, these are different techniques I have listed here. You can pause the video and look at them in more detail. These are an example of the 12 to 13 techniques that I used when I did my study and that I was looking for in L2 speeches. Could speakers use these techniques then? Some of them you may know. Alliteration is fairly famous. Euphemisms as well. Hyperbole, of course, we all know. Other ones, perhaps a little bit rarer ones, anaphora, or things like that. Then the second way, then, that we can look at rhetorical strategies and analyze them is to take a more general approach to communication. That includes looking at content and supporting information and how they tie together in one particular theme. This is known as message framing, and they often take the form of a dichotomy. And there's a few examples here I have on my slide. Positive framing versus negative framing. And to give you an example, if you were talking about climate change, you could choose a positive framing approach, which means that you would focus on all the good things we could do by helping the world, preventing climate change, building a better future for our children, versus a negative framing approach, which would stress all the disasters going around the world now, all the things that might happen, and the future extinction of humanity if we don't do anything. That's kind of how it works then. One more example, reward framing and punishment framing. This is kind of the approach that is often used by parents towards their children. Reward framing, if you want your child to study, you would phrase the rhetoric in terms of, if you study hard, I'll give you lots of treats, or I'll let you use your smartphone for an extra 20 minutes. Versus punishment framing. In other words, if you don't study harder, I'm taking your phone away, or you don't get dessert. These are the kinds of general approaches that rhetoricians and speakers use. Future framing, past framing, safety framing, fear framing, these are all things that you probably can figure out too then. In my study then, I looked at essentially three dichotomies and the positive framing versus the negative framing, the top-down versus the bottom-up strategies. And essentially this was for governments. Top-down strategies, can governments take action versus bottom-up strategies, can the general public take action? We also have the future-focused framing versus the past-focused framing. What can we do in the future? What can we do to go back to the past? And so on. So, sorry to rush through that so quickly, but just to tell you a little bit about my study then, I looked at 5 Japanese speakers. Their first language is Japanese, obviously, making speeches in English. Now, these are 5 speakers who are not politicians, not professional speakers, not trained in the art of rhetoric. 2 of them are actually high school students. And essentially, my research question is, what are the rhetorical techniques and framing strategies used by Japanese activists? They're all speaking about gender activity. They're promoting gender equality, advocating for it. Now, I looked at the micro and macro techniques, and essentially, I was trying to find out, first of all, do they actually use rhetoric in their speeches, considering it's their second language? What kinds of rhetoric do they use? And the ultimate goal, of course, is as a teacher, can my students then use this? Can they model these kind of speeches? And if they can, this can be the future of rhetoric. It's no longer the limited domain of white English politicians. L2 speakers can use it as well then. So, what did I find very briefly then? The micro techniques, as you can see here, all speakers used a wide range of techniques. There were differences, of course, but all 5, including the 2 high school speakers, were using a collaboration, a combination of different techniques. Some techniques like antithesis, rhetorical question, and anaphora were used the most. Now, this is likely because these techniques are a little bit simpler to use. You can use them multiple times as well then. They have a powerful effect, and they don't require a lot of complicated language to use. Some techniques, a bit more complicated techniques, like an oxymoron, were not used at all by anybody. That's probably because, again, as I say, you need a lot of complicated techniques to put that one together. A couple more things then, worth noting. The more poetic techniques were used the least, and the more emphatic techniques, as I say before, the antithesis, things that add a little bit of emphasis to the speech, these were used more often by the speakers then. And one more interesting finding for the micro techniques then is that the male speaker used the least amount of techniques. On the chart there, you can see Shu Matsuo is the male speaker. He used far less techniques than the 4 female speakers. And no doubt this is because, as a male, talking about gender equality, he doesn't want to come across as insincere, or maybe using a little bit too much rhetoric. He could be criticized for that. He wanted to just talk generally and just to talk about his specific ideas and without dressing them up too much. Now, in terms of the macro techniques, you can see once again a range of framing approaches were adopted. All the speakers used different kinds of framing approaches, but they did use at least a few in combination. And the female speakers, not surprisingly, perhaps used a lot more negative framing. Many of them were talking about their experiences, things that had happened to them in terms of discrimination and so on. And once again, the male speaker, of course, used a lot of positive framing. He was stressing more of the future, what could be gained by bringing about equality, by improving the rights of women in Japan. Now, a couple more things then. Bottom-up strategies were preferred over top-down strategies. This was a little bit surprising. I figured that the Japanese campaigners would advocate for more government assistance, but they didn't. They were quite keen on promoting gender equality movements from the grassroots movement. And finally, then, many of the speakers focused on the present instead of the future or the past. A lot of them were just describing what's going on now, what's happening, what could be done, what should be done. That was an interesting finding as well, then. So, with only a couple of minutes left, let me quickly tell you some of the implications then. Rhetoric was used in all 5 speeches. That's important to note. It's no longer just an English language specialty. Um, L2 speakers can use it when they speak in English too. A wide range of techniques were used by the speakers. It's not just limited to 1 or 2 techniques. This perhaps suggests that rhetoric is easy to use. It's not something that relies on knowing a lot about ancient Greece or philosophy. Genre-specific rhetoric, perhaps. My study was only based on gender equality, so it would be interesting to look at different kinds of gender or genres, such as climate change and so on. And finally, I think the key takeaway from my study, if you don't remember anything else, the key is L2 speakers can utilize rhetoric to enhance their public speeches, whether they're professional speakers or students. And this would suggest that the future of rhetoric in public speaking lies with L2 speakers. L2 speakers outnumber quote unquote native English speakers. So why not use it? Why can't these people, why can't these students, why can't the people we are talking to also use rhetoric? And just to quickly give you an overview, if you want to pause the slide, these are some of the references that I used. I'll pause there for a second. And finally, just a quick little acknowledgement for some generous financial support for the study. And my name and email address. If you are interested in getting in touch with me, if you found something interesting and you would like to ask me, please feel free to send me an email. And also, if you are interested in the study in greater detail, my article will be published for the proceedings for this conference, and so please go and check it out then. Thank you very much, and thank you for tuning in.